want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandflakes here, back with a new Try 9 video. Today's video is going to be very discussion heavy, not much gameplay in the background. I was staring at tension cards a lot for the past few days, and I really want to talk about them, even though I don't really have enough to build out entire sets to show off what they do. And I'm hoping that by talking about them, either more experienced players can have better discussions around them, and if you're newer, you can have an easier time wrapping your head around what they do and how to best utilize them. So that's the reason why I'm in the card shop. It's because since I don't own a lot of tension cards, but I have plans for them, I can more easily access those things that I have unlocked to better illustrate my point of how interesting and diverse of a system tension cards are. So I guess as a further intro to an already long intro, the tension card system is fairly complex, but if you talk to other people about it, they might say that it's actually not that interesting because the meta of Tribe 9 right now is just essentially pumping as high of a number as you can into bosses to kill them as quickly as possible. So obviously, you have the Patamon system for that, where you can increase your raw stats, but tension cards are also another layer of damage you can add to your character's kits to increase your damage output and hit those crazy numbers. And obviously, there are more tension cards, and I'll be kind of bloating this video and talking about those tension cards as well. So like ones that increase healing, ones that increase defense, ones that do interesting things that aren't just bloating damage. And while it won't be relevant now, hopefully it will be relevant later as the game becomes more mature. So with that said, we can jump into my tension card collection so I can go over the very basics of tension cards. So on the tension card UI, you'll notice that there are pretty much two, besides the icon itself, there are two very big points of information you can find, and that's going to be the tension card phase, and then the, I guess like the tribe or the family it's associated with. And these are more for the eyeball test if you're kind of more experienced with the system, especially as newer cards come out, so that you can see exactly what should be paired at a more, I guess, like general level. Now, these cards do have effects that interact with each other in more specific ways, but it's really nice that they added this icon just to make it so that you can see, like, oh, this should go with this because it has this icon. But obviously, the book's cover isn't everything, so you do need to click through them to make sure you know exactly what they do. And I'll talk about that more as I get into the cards in more a granular level. So, obviously, I talk about tension phase. This is really important to know because this is essentially at what stage of the fight your cards will be active in. So the zeros will represent zero tension phase, which essentially means that your cards are active immediately, no matter what. The cards might have their own separate condition, but as long as you meet that separate condition, you will have the effect active. And then obviously phase 1 is going to be when you have phase 1 tension cards. So that's going to be when you start a fight, but I guess like you run into a fight instead of starting it manually. Or for example, in Fractal Vice, where the final boss will give you tension 1 at the very beginning instead of tension 2 when you start it. Unlike if you had started fights with other mob bosses or mob packs rather, in the overworld by hitting them first. Speaking of hitting them first, obviously if you've been playing the game, you know that if you hit a mob first in the overworld or Fractal Vice or Rift, you start with tension phase 2. And so these tension phase 2 cards will be pretty accessible if you're just farming monsters in Fractal Vice. But if you are starting bosses, these won't be active immediately. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to load out tension 2 cards. Again, because of the meta of the game, you'll either be using these tension 2 cards immediately, so ideally they'll buff your damage up, or you're using them in Fractal Vice where you can kind of have more free reign with their effects. And then the final tension phase is going to be tension phase EX. This is only accessible if you have a very niche setup in the first break phase, or if you have a niche setup, or rather if you are able to break twice and your tension cards consume no other tension, unless you again have some niche effect that gives you artificial tension increases. So these EX tension cards are going to be your least accessible ones unless you've designed the fight around these cards and you know that you'll be able to guarantee utilize them. And of course, again, I mentioned that there are ways to get these effects active anyways if you use characters like Todoroki and Iroha, which really inflate your tension gauge increase. And with those characters, you can actually hit EX very easily on the first break. So onto the icons, a very useful filter, or okay, I guess before I go into the icons, keep in mind that there are tension cards that don't have an icon period. So these are kind of more universal, generic cards that you can use in any team. Some of them do have effects or locks that you need to fulfill in order to use them more properly, but I'll talk about them or either you should explore them because I might not talk about them, or I might accidentally talk about them because they're interesting to me at the moment and I want to look at them. But with the tribeless cards out of the way, an easy way to sort the cards that have icons is to actually go into your filter and just filter them out. So you can see that the game has pretty much gotten all of them out for you. And as far as I can tell, there are no dual tribe icons yet. They're all just singular copies. So for the first one, the one that's going to be the most tangible to talk about is going to be Kingship, because there is a card in the shop that I want to talk about for Kingship that is really interesting. But essentially, when you click on Kingship, you can see the cards you equip on the very top, so just ignore that as a filter. But if you go into the cards that involve the effects, I mean, you can see that I was hovering full party the entire time, so you can probably tell by the bottom line that they will always explain everything for you, for the most part. So it'll tell you, like, oh, in order to use this card, you need Unity. And then you can tell that, I guess as an example, with full party, it's not actually granting Unity itself, so you need another card to actually give your party Unity in order to activate the card. And so this, again, carries over to Kingship. You can see that Kingship on competition, the first effect is actually pretty generic. And if you wanted to use something like competition, I'm not sure if it's actually that good of a card, but if you want to use this, you could actually use it without Kingship at all, which is, again, why it's important to check cards out, even though they have tribe icons associated on them. But sometimes these secondary effects from having the tribe active versus not having them active is pretty big. So again, competition, you get most of the value from having the card in general. But if you want to know what the tribe effect does, you can click on the icon, or the name rather, with the brackets around it, and it'll tell you, okay, so yeah, Kingship has 30 stacks. As you get more stacks, you do more damage on your primary, secondary, and chain attack. And also, if you recover stamina outside of the basic regen, you get 1 stack. This last line actually makes Kingship kind of awkward to stack, because I think this means stamina recovery via tension cards, unless there's a character that's released eventually who can artificially gain tension outside of, or rather, artificially increase their stamina outside tension cards. So if you were to hit 30 stacks of Kingship, then this goes from 0.08 to actually being 2.4, I think, is the math. Yeah, so it actually does scale very, very nicely with Kingship, but then if you want to do that, you have to find ways to not only grant yourself Kingship, but potentially stack Kingship, because this is a very Kingship heavy card. And so a card that grants Kingship, for example, would be Phalanx. And you can see that on the last line. It says when a character grants Shield, grant that character Kingship. So it's really important to know what the effect is doing, because you can see on the second line here, it says effect target, character conditions met. So this means, this is another way you can filter on the sides. You can see that if I click here, Phalanx will pop up with all the other Kingship cards. But the reason why this is important is because the card next to it, which is called Leading Wisdom, again, you can see it's a Kingship card and it interacts with Kingship, but on the final line, it says consume all party member Kingship stacks, and then to do an effect. So if you want to utilize Leading Wisdom, you'll have to find a card that gives all of your characters Kingship, potentially, and then have a tension card that somehow lets your AIs generate Kingship, so that you can get the max value out of the secondary effect of Leading Wisdom, which is to make your tension card cheaper to use, which is a pretty big deal. Obviously, Leading Wisdom's main value is going to be through the first effect, increasing ultimate skill damage, which you don't need Kingship for, but it's nice to run Kingship just to have a somewhat cheaper ult. And speaking of the effects on the cards themselves, I probably should have covered this first, but these cards do scale with level, and they also scale with something called Ascension Stage. Ascension Stages are essentially the dupes connected to the card, so as you get more cards, you'll be able to increase it through the dupes. But it's important to know that these dupes are essentially, okay, that's a better way to word this. So let me see if I can find I already AL'd card, so I'll have to bounce through the card shop for this. So it's important to know that the Ascension Stages, or rather everything, Ascension Stages and levels will increase the card's stats on the screen. If you level a card to 50, you're only getting about 88% total of the card's effects. You need to have your Ascension Stage maxed out to gain the about like 10 to 12%, I think, stats left of the card effect. So obviously, I don't actually have any cards here that are at Ascension 5 and level 50 because, as you can tell, my Kane is really low, so I'm just a poor, broke person. So obviously Todoroki would hate me. But if I were to go to a card that I've already ascended to 5, let's see if we can actually sort by that. I can. So if we're going to a card that I have at level 5, and I have a level 1, you can tell here, these are bad ones to check out. So you can see here that I have Grinder at level 1, and the strategy skill damage multiplier is at 2.6%. So if I were to go to Salt really quickly, just to check out Grinder again, I think it's supposed to be in the 1 cost, right? You can see that the base value is going to be 0.34%. So I've essentially gained 0.26% value from Grinder, from max ascending it, which is about 12% of the value. And I'm actually not sure. This is again something I probably should have checked before I made the video, but I don't know if the scaling is directly connected to the ascension or if it's just a flat value gain. But you can see that most of the value you're getting is from leveling it. So I'm going from 2.6 to 4.51. And then from this alone, I'm getting, let's say I'm getting about 1.9%. So I can expect that I'm missing about 7.5% of this multiplier value without having level 50. So this should actually be about 10% total. And then we can see earlier that if I bought the card through the shop, I'm actually looking at, I think 1.24. So I guess based off that, I do think Ascension Stage does directly affect the scaling of the level. But if you're someone who's actually looked into this more closely, please let me know. I'm just going to assume that, I'm just going to go ahead with my narrative that Ascension Stage, without maxing it, you're losing about 12% of the total value of your card, which isn't a big deal because 12% value isn't that much. But if you're looking to maximize the effect of something, or you need to hit a breakpoint for that card to achieve a certain strategy, keep that in mind because that will be pretty relevant if you're like 10 tension off of something, and the only way you can get that 10 tension is by max ascending something, and that card is a card you have to gotcha for. So yeah, before I get into the cards I want to talk about, I want to continue talking about knowing what you need to build to achieve something. So for example, just being stuck on kingship. I talked about earlier how, you know, you need certain phases to achieve card effects, and then you need certain conditions to get that additional effect from that. So the reason why I want to talk about like knowing what your cards do and paying attention to the attention phase is because kingship, the cards I own at least, you can tell that I only have 1 card, or I have 2 cards that grant kingship, and these 2 cards are both at tension 2. So if I were to start a boss fight that is not in the overworld, so like if I have to talk to an NPC for it, so for example, Fractal Vice final bosses, or currently Shark and Brave Diver, I won't be gaining the value from kingship until I hit tension 2. And for those particular teams I'm running tension beast, or for those teams I would be running on, that won't happen until my first break, which is quite far into the fight if I'm not really on top of it. And obviously I lose all the value I could have gained for kingship beforehand. But if I were to look into the shop, I would see that there is actually a card I can use to immediately gain kingship without having to go through that effort. And that should be, oh, they swapped the order on me. And that kingship card would be actually a 2-star, thankfully enough. And that would be Liebenschreib. I don't know how to pronounce that. But you can see here that this is a tension 0 card, and it grants your operating character, so only the character piloting kingship immediately. And maybe if you swap through all the characters, it would grant all of them kingship immediately. But since I don't own the card, I don't know. But that's like something to test on. But this would be a way to gain kingship early, so I can start farming value off of kingship sooner, and also get more value on the leading wisdom card, so that it's more powerful the moment it begins. And also, obviously, having Liebenschreib means that I can drop the Failings card that I was using, and so that way I don't need to actually run Failings anymore. The primary attack multiplier is pretty good, so I'd probably still run it anyways, but if I were to run these other cheaper cards, I could drop Failings and I'd have full effect from kingship way earlier. And yeah, since I've already opened the store, You can see that there's currency in the top right on how to buy these cards. The most free-to-play friendly and the most accessible cards are always going to be these 1-star cards. The reason why I have 0 right now is because there's actually 2 ways to spend this currency. So the first way obviously is in the card shop, and the way I get these currency before I get too ahead of myself is usually by converting the cards themselves. So for the 2-star and the 3-star tension card currencies, you can actually gain these currencies by pulling dupes of cards in gacha. So if you pull like a billion Mitas on the current Kazuki banner, you'll gain more of these currencies. If you somehow pulled like 7 Kazukis, you gain a lot more of these 3-star currencies. And these currencies do exist in other places. So for example, this 3-star currency, this does exist when you clear Fractal Vice every week. You gain a certain amount of Fractal Vice points, and you'll gain more and more of these as you go through the stages there. But otherwise, the reason why I say the 2-star and 1-star Tetra cards are fairly free-to-play friendly is because not only can you get them at a much easier rate, you can also farm for certain 2-star cards that which you can then convert in order to buy these. So for example, All Out, Bombard, Cross Counter Attack. Oh, okay, the other ones aren't on here. But for example, these 3, you can actually farm from the roaming bosses out in the map. But the cards that are missing here that I expected to find that are also 2-star and very easily, well, not very easily farmed because it is actually kind of an annoyance to get them to drop. But those cards are going to be the Detonator card, which is farmed from the Shark, and then also the Blades Dance card, which is farmed from Brave Diver. So if you really were dedicated to farming these 2-star tension card currencies, you can just whack these bosses over and over again until you max them out, and then continue whacking them until you can convert them. Or if you don't care about these cards, you can convert them early. But these cards are also really interesting because again, they're very farmable, so you can actually achieve max value from them pretty easily. And by doing so, you can have like a pretty interesting effect where you can either focus on doing a lot of crits on targets under control to generate a lot of additional attacks that don't really do that much damage, but is really fun to watch at work. Or you can do Blades Dance, which is not as spammy and also not as costly as Detonator. As you can see, Detonator is kind of a relic from the original patches of the game where they would consume tension as they do the thing. You can see here that's consumed tension by 2. So that actually means each individual proc of Detonator is eating your tension by 2. So that doesn't mean that the moment you're able to use it, it's -2. It's every individual bolt that you fire is -2 tension. So if you're at 200 tension from hitting tension phase 2, you can only proc this effect 50 times, which is obviously a lot of times, but you're not getting infinite attacks. Whereas with Blade Dance, you are getting infinite procs because, as you can see, there's no tension consumption text addendum. So yeah, the other way you can spend these points is going to be through the shop on the very bottom tab. You can see here that there's Kane, there's some other related things, and then there's currency. I've been buying this currency just because I love pulling. And also, there's not really much else here. Obviously, it's kind of denying my way of getting the 3-star tension cards. So I should probably start using this because going for this monthly would be 150 of these currencies. And I'm trading 5 pulls. Or I'd be trading, let's see, 17 pulls for a guaranteed 3-star tension cards. So I should probably stop doing that. Just as a warning for everyone else who might be tempted to buy this. I would say all these other things aren't really worth it because all of these are tradables on the 3-star things. So these are all from roaming bosses. So you can just trade up and up and up. I'm not really sure if it's worth the time saved to buy these. So you should probably honestly always say the 3-star tension card currency for the cards themselves. For the 2-star currency, I recommend buying the Enigmas. I recommend buying these Judge Robot things too, because these can be converted into gifts that you can only get weekly through Fractal Vice boss clears. And then I think these are also used for other currencies, but essentially this is another limited way of getting limited currencies that you need to push your character potentials if you're trying to go past Extreme 1, and also just get higher friendship more easily. And obviously Kane is pretty important If I were to buy all this, I get 100,000 Kane for only 50 of these cards. So I'll probably do that in a moment because I'm, again, really poor. And then the 1-star tension card currencies, the ones that will be most accessible if you do any amount of fast mob farming in the bottom right of the map in Minato City, and I think it's a Daibu dock. You'll be getting a lot of these very, very easily because it's actually really easy to farm this. For these, very cheap to just buy out the Enigma entities and secret medals for your pulls, and then also buy out the monthly 100k Kane. And then after that, you can either finish out your gacha only 1-star cards, or you can just go ahead and buy out the Kane. You can buy the folders and the like collectibles, but I don't think it's worth it. Each time you buy one of these, you're dropping 500 Kane. Or no, each time you buy one of these, you're dropping 2,000 Kane. And it's way easier to get this than it is to get 2,000 Kane in my personal experience. So I just full send it on the Kane so you can be a bit more rich as you exist in the game. And so yeah, for the last few minutes of the video, I know it's already really long. If you made it this far and watched the entire thing, thank you. This will be my propaganda section of the game. Obviously, there are tension cards that are already very popular, and the most popular one is going to be Full Party and Strike Zone. And there's a very good reason for that. Full Party and Strike Zone are very, very nice. This is like well, Strike Zone, first of all, is a card that you might only be able to pull through gacha, which is why I brought up the store, because you can see I only have Ascension 3 versus a farmable Ascension, or a farmable rather, 1-star card, I think like Hooligan or something down here. Oh, right here, Theoretical Armor, which I've been selling a lot. And again, you want to make sure you buy Strike Zone if you haven't already pulled it, if you want to use Full Party, because it doubles the effect of Full Party. But this actually leads into my kind of propaganda aspect, where I'm actually sure if Full Party plus Strike Zone is actually that great once you're into the later games or later phases of the game. I'm still using it because my cards aren't really that great to drop them. Since I'm an Inoki main, I do need a lot of crit to make sure she's consistent. And besides a card like Maximization, which I am already using on my main Inoki team, there's not really many ways to get crit in general. Now, obviously, they have released a new card with Kazuki, or Kazuki, and that card is pretty ridiculous. I'm trying to find Maximization just so I can show you guys what it is. But Maximization is ironically a card that I think kind of shows... Oh, I already have it equipped. It's a card that I think ironically shows how inefficient Full Party is. Because you can see here, Full Party increases my crit rate by 13.5%. And then Strike Zone obviously doubles it. But Strike Zone is effectively acting as a second copy of Full Party. So I'm not actually getting 26% or 27% crit from Full Party. I'm still only getting 13.5. I'm just getting another 13.5 from Strike Zone. And obviously, Strike Zone is getting Unity and the Synergy Multiplier, but it's like a very small amount. If I were to go to Maximization, you can see that leveling it is also kind of inefficient because it's only increasing the duration of control, but control itself actually increases your crit by 15% when you're hitting the person that you gave control. So this 1-star card, like at level 1, is already giving more crit than Full Party is. But obviously I'm gonna run all 3 of them because I just need that raw crit that badly. And the Kazuki card I was talking about, the one that's already potentially kind of like low-key power creeping Full Party by an insane amount, is already purchasable in the card station. So maybe as the game goes on, you'll be able to continue purchasing these new gacha cards through the card shop if you're looking for it. But as you can see here, this card is already giving you crit. So 2.7% crit for 30 seconds, and then 1.8 crit per stack of Nighttime Ponder, which is when you trigger the additional attack, which is through Kazuki's Summon or do something like Shark, or rather Detonator and Grave Diver cards. And you can see here that when you give a shield, you also give crit. So at level 50 with Max Ascension, this is giving you about 15% crit, and this is 10% crit per stack. So as a singular card at full power, you're getting up to 45% crit through one card. And then if you're at level 50 without Max Ascension, I think it drops down to like 42%. And then if you're at level 30 like I am with no Ascension, you're probably looking more at like 37% crit, which is still higher by a really high amount than the full set of Full Party and Strike Zone. and it only costs 1 card slot. And again, it's totally fine to combine full party with maximization and dropping like capable guy theory or ferocity in my case for nighttime ponder. Like that just makes total sense to guarantee I have 100% crit to make my team super efficient. But it's just another point of like knowing what your cards do so that you can be more efficient with your card slots. Because if I were to get rather a full copy of nighttime ponder, and then I were to get it like almost maxed out, personally I would be dropping Strike Zone full party because I would just run 3 crit lines at my Patamons, which is a point of contention and discussion with a lot of the community that talks to so far on it. But I'd be running it with I'd then be able to run other cards like All Out, which gives me way more damage. I'd be able to run other cards like ones I don't own under 3 stars, like ones that give me more damage on my strategy skill for Inoki, so that I do again more damage. And speaking of Inoki, there is another version of, I guess you call it power creep with Bad Wish. Bad Wish is another card that's very, very similar to Things to Hold On To, where it's just a very, very much higher version, better version than full party plus Strike Zone, because it's giving me way more crit, and it's also giving me some other auxiliary effect that is really helpful for Inoki. And obviously there is the small downside where she can't heal while she's fighting, but like you could actually I think you can actually skirt around that by character swapping to your healer to heal if you really need to, or by doing the Inoki thing and just killing the enemy units faster than they can stay alive. So again, always good to know what cards do to see if you can change them around. Again, I will probably still be leveling full party to 50 just because it is generically very powerful, and I'm a far long away from getting these 3-star cards that would replace it. But it's just something to note as you develop your account more fully and you're looking for ways to expand your card effectiveness and versatility. You can drop full party and go other cards, and you can start looking at cards that are way more interesting, like the Semba card that makes Semba way more effective, or stuff like All Out that makes you do more damage, or in the future as you unlock more cards and get more bored with the current state of the game, you can even start looking into cards like the Koishi one, which if I can find it. Actually, it might not even be Koishi on the thing. It is, which is Reverse Therapy, which lets you deal damage based on how much you heal, which would be really, really funny to watch. So yeah, that's gonna be the video. Pretty long ramble, and it's probably a little too dense for the talk of the cards, but I really want to talk about it now so I could kind of sort my ideas on it myself as I just yaps into the mic. And yeah, I hope the video was helpful. If you learned a lot, please let me know, and if you want to argue with me on if I'm downplaying Strike Zone and full party too much, please feel free to do that as well. I appreciate you guys sticking around for this long, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Bye bye.